And now Work Matters with Julie Mann.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to that show that ponders the big question, does work matter? And if it does, why? On this show, we love to ponder things that impact our workspace because, we all spend a lot of time here and we all spend a lot of time in work. And, work impacts so many parts of our life that you get to think about it in really a broad sense. And those are some of the fun things that we get to do on this show is think about, what does matter and what are other things that kind of weave into that. And so what's exciting about this show is I have in the studio, I have like a real person, which is really exciting. But we are going to talk about from a nonprofit standpoint of view, which again, companies have social responsibility and to those nonprofits, and companies interact with nonprofits, and we all as humans and individuals, whether we're employees, personally or professionally, interact with nonprofits. So it is a big part of how we weave who we are. And so anyway, in studio, I have with me Shari Montgomery, and she is the founder and the CEO of the House of Promise. So not only do we get to, and I kind of talked about this on last show, so we did 2 segments. So if you missed another one, go back and grab it. But, it's fun to think about this thing, but to think about it with somebody who's actually in that every single day, as opposed to just kind of like us thinking about it, is really just a treat. So Shari, thanks for joining us. So we're going to start out. I would love to, let's talk just a smidge so that we can kind of dive in and set the stage for the listening audience of, what is the House of Promise? And again, what I think about is, not only what is it, but why is it different, from some other nonprofits? Just to give a quick little umbrella of that, because then we can kind of dive in a little bit further and talk about how things have, in a COVID time, have really impacted your operations and what you do. And I think that'll resonate. I know from conversations with you, it'll resonate with those who have a nonprofit mindset. But what's amazing about Shari is that she comes from the profit sector. She originally had her own business. So she's a very business-oriented thinker. And so when she speaks, I always am like, wow, that actually makes sense to whichever world you're in. So, all right, I'm going to quit babbling and turn it over to you. So,
hi. Okay, so the House of Promise houses severely sexually abused and trafficked women. And so we're different in the sense, number one, there's not a lot of us out there across the country. There's getting to be more and more.
Which is fascinating that there's not, but keep going.
Yeah. And we'll so that. But the need is going to get greater very fast. And so, you're saying having the business mind, I'm looking ahead going, okay, we've got to grow, we're not full yet, but we got to grow. And so, but where the House of Promise is different than I think probably a lot of nonprofits is that, I didn't really want to say that, I don't want to compare myself saying that I'm so much better. That's what I didn't want to say. But anyway, we treat every girl differently. Mm-hmm. So every girl that comes in, it's not a cookie cutter treatment plan for them. Every girl has their own treatment plan. Mm-hmm. We don't take any state or federal funding. So everything we depend on the community for. And it gives us a little more leeway to do what needs to be done with our girls. I mean, some of them are so broken when they come in. Mm-hmm. So we're very different when it comes to that. Mm-hmm. We tend to, we say we're a 2-year program. Our girls will stay with us as long as they have to stay with us. I mean, if I have someone that's very severely, broken, they may end up being here for 3 years. That hasn't happened yet. We've had some huge success, but
you can do that if you need to.
Yes.
And I think one of the key things of that is, you talked about that community funding component.
Yes.
And I have to believe that, with the COVID times, so many things have changed, right? Mm-hmm. Everything from, I would think, again, I'm thinking for you, which isn't the right thing, but here's what's going on in my mind. I mean, I would think that, historically you had several events that were your primary revenue drivers. You had Beauty for Ashes and you had your different initiatives, and we're just not doing those things these days. So, talk to me about how how COVID has kind of impacted, you're running your business and getting that support from the community. Because I've got to believe that there's differences, and that it's really caused you to think hard on how do you sustain.
Yeah. So for one thing, we didn't close down with COVID. So that's a big piece right there. We were considered an essential, and so we were taking girls in during that time. So nothing changed with us,
Right.
as far as finances go, other than the fundraising just stopped. It's what I learned in the for-profit world is relationship, and I just have some amazing partners out there that they knew. They knew we need you, and they all really rallied around us. But it makes you sit back. I will do things so different now after going through 2020. I do want to figure out different ways of supporting the House of Promise, especially because we need to grow. And so, having a few fundraisers during the year is not going to get us where we need to be. So it's fun. 2021 is going to be really different for us, I think.
Oh, absolutely. And what about, so you brought up something about interesting. So during COVID, the house was still open. You still had people coming in. So that kind of brings me over to, one of the things that I've seen in the business sector is, that volunteerism, right? So you have employees and employers who have traditionally had, VTO programs, volunteer time off programs, who have had employees volunteer. And even some of those opportunities are still hard to find. So how have you guys worked with, do you have a need for volunteers as a nonprofit? Because I think some of the businesses think it's COVID, we're not, therefore they don't need, or they can't allow people to volunteer anymore. And so that's my question is, can employees still volunteer, or can people still volunteer in an organization like yours, even with COVID, and what does that look like?
Oh, yes, we definitely need volunteers. It did probably slow down a little bit with COVID because a lot of the girls' therapy and stuff started going on Zoom, so we didn't have as much, transportation, and that's huge for us. Things are opening up now, and that's one of our biggest needs is finding people that will transport our girls to different their therapy, their doctor's appointments, all of that.
Right.
When you get 6 girls and they're going 6 different directions during the day, I don't have enough staff for that.
So people could drive.
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
And so you can mask up and drive.
Yep.
So there's ways so it sounds like even, with your organization, that there's ways that we can still find ways as either, again, a person or a professional to engage and still provide that community support through volunteering?
Definitely.
That's interesting because honestly, I was having a conversation with somebody about that the other day, and this business, a business person. And they said, well, there is you don't volunteer anymore. So they were looking at restructuring their volunteer time off program because they said that people are not allowed to volunteer. And quite honestly, I didn't know the answer. So I was thinking, I've got Shari coming on the show. So I can answer that question.
Yes, we need volunteers.
Yeah. So it's probably just thinking through different ways, but you still need that help.
Yes, definitely. Very definitely.
Yeah. See, that's really interesting. So, all right. So let's go. Sorry, I kind of went off topic a little bit. So let's come back to kind of that nonprofit impact. So if you think about, again, so Beauty for Ashes used to be your big event, right?
Yes.
So if that doesn't occur, maybe it will, maybe it won't, who knows? But what are other avenues that you've kind of used? You've said reaching out from a relationship standpoint of view. Have you found any other interesting ways of just kind of community engagement, or, kind of how do you keep branding during that time? Because I think when you have a gala such as that, right, it's a big branding initiative. So how do you kind of keep that going during, as we kind of work to open back up?
Well, we had a couple things that came up that, was so much a blessing for us. WLNS and WLAJ 53 teamed up with us and told us we made a telethon. It was a half-hour telethon, and it was during January Human Trafficking Awareness Month. Oh, and that was amazing. It brought in, some money for us, but it's that piece of getting the community aware. That's so much of our fundraising is, our events are getting the community aware that this is here. I'm so surprised how many people still don't know.
Yeah.
We've got hurting women out there that need our help.
Well, and it's a real issue, I mean, and it's sometimes it's kind of hard just really to wrap your mind around it, that, wow, the things that are going on, right? So, but they are.
Yes.
And so,
definitely.
like you said, I think part of it is education awareness for any of the nonprofits, right? Is, because we don't have maybe the ability to engage as we used to as much, it's really, helping everyone understand what it is that you do and what it is that you need. Because I think there's that a little bit of a disconnect right now between business and nonprofit. And this is just my personal opinion. But I think we just don't know how to help, other than cut a check. And so, and not that there's anything
those
wrong
are
with
always good. Just saying, we haven't ruled those out.
No, I'm not saying we have. So those are all really good things. But there's, how do we engage, and what do people need, and are there other things that we can do or that companies can do? Because, companies as well, profit or nonprofit, everybody's trying to make it through this thing financially in a wise and responsible way. But what are other things, and how do we know what that is? So I just feel like there's like this little bit. Again, I was so excited to have you here, because it's like, what are things that companies can still do? Because I know nonprofits still need community support, and businesses still need to have a social responsible footprint. And so you have the two entities that are still trying to go in the same direction, and it's like, how do we do that? Which I think is kind of interesting.
And what popped in my head when you were saying that, this was before COVID, but there was a business here in town that adopted us. And that's what I'm finding, more and more businesses will adopt us. But with them, they did all different kinds of fundraisers through the year. So they gave us a nice check at the end, but they also came out and they worked in our yard for a day. They built a bridge for us. They painted walls for it. I mean, it was just phenomenal. So we were their charity of the year, basically. And, what they did that year for us was just phenomenal. And I think that's that is a good thing for businesses to do.
Right.
Get to know who we were. I actually went in there and spoke to the whole team and told them who we were and what we are, what we do. And I think that maybe a link, maybe a lot of businesses aren't got all their employees back yet.
Right.
But, those are huge if you have someone come in and share what's happening.
Well, and what I found interesting, so my brain went a little bit on a side direction, but, if I think about the workplace, which is what I think about all the time, creating employee engagement opportunities is what's at the heart of everybody's mind right now, right? How do we continue to create engagement when we're dispersed? And, sometimes, what we can't do maybe is gather around a picnic table and have a big company picnic. But what we can do is we can rally around a nonprofit or an issue, and we can create engagement in that way. And this is all new thinking just coming out of my mind. So it's always kind of scary when that happens. But, through things like you just said, like that adoption process, through having, Jeans Friday, where everybody puts in $1 and then all of those funds go to that nonprofit. And, it gives everybody something to rally around. And, again, find that secondary purpose in your workplace. And, it's the stuff that you go home and you talk about at the dinner table, right?
Yes.
It's like, man, this is really kind of neat that we did this today. And when we did this, it made me feel good. And boy, that was great. And by the way, I really like who I work for, because they took the time and effort to organize that. And it made me feel good. Because at the end of the day, we're all humans and we all have big hearts, and making that connection in the business world and in the community sector is kind of what makes the world go round. And I think that's really neat. I'd never thought about that kind of adoption and linking that adoption to employee engagement. Because I'll tell you, we're all struggling with employee engagement, and the virtual events are great, but, how can we engage in a different way that maybe is outside of a Zoom meeting, which is just learning about a company, learning about an issue, and then creating programs around it.
Yes.
So how neat. Sherry, I just love talking to you all the time. Thank you so much for joining me. To everybody listening, thanks for listening to us as well. Really important stuff. So as I always say before we close, let's transform today. Let's have an impact on tomorrow. And until next time, let's make work matter.